Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here, and I'm very honored to open the session called Azerbaijan, Emerging Gateway for Green Growth and Connectivity. We hope that today's discussion will offer an insightful overview of investment opportunities in Azerbaijan and how the government is driving forward its growth and connectivity agenda through regional partnerships and private sector collaboration. I'm honored to be joined by a distinguished panel representing the government, private sector, and global advisory expertise. Together, they will share insights on the reforms, partnerships, and strategic initiatives that are shaping Azerbaijan's role in the green economy and regional trade. So let's welcome Mr. Mikayil Jabbarov, the Minister of Economy of Azerbaijan and Governor for EBRD, Mr. Elnur Soltanov, Deputy Minister of Energy and COP29 CEO, Mr. Mazin, Chief Financial Officer for Masdar Global, and Yermolai Solzhenitsyn, Senior Partner for McKinsey & Company. Before we dive into today's discussion, let me briefly highlight EBRD's engagement in Azerbaijan. Over the years, we've been a strong partner in the country's journey towards a more resilient, inclusive, and diversified economy. Our investments have spanned from energy to infrastructure to financial institutions and support for small and medium-sized businesses. Just as importantly, we've placed sustainability, green innovation, and good governance at the heart of our work. The slide on the screen presents our engagement in the country to date. Over the years, we've invested over $4 billion in the country, roughly under 200 projects. In the past 3 years, we have been continuously growing our investments in the country, and last year, we have done almost 200 million euros. And I'm very proud to say that 80% of these investments were in green economy. Importantly, our impact goes beyond financing. We have supported transformative policy and reform efforts, from designing the country's first renewable energy auction and hydrogen strategy outlook to PPP legislation and green city planning for Ganja. Many of these areas will be our discussion today. As we get started, feel free to scan the QR code for Slido. Can I please have the Slido code? Take the code, and please feel free to ask questions throughout the sessions, and we will attempt to take them at the end of the session. Okay. So, to begin, we will first turn our attention to Azerbaijan's broader decarbonization agenda and reform agenda. The country has set ambitious climate targets, aiming to raise the share of renewable energy in the installed power grid generation capacity to at least 30% by year 2030. The vision is underpinned by significant private sector participation in a large-scale renewable energy projects, and Azerbaijan reaffirmed its commitment to to climate change by hosting COP29 last year, marking a milestone in its global climate leadership. Minister Jabbarov, my first question will be to you. What key reforms and strategies is the government implementing to accelerate its green energy transition and attract private sector investments?
Thank you very much. First of all, allow me to start with a couple of acknowledgements. And the first, of course, is due to bank and the management and the team who made today's event possible. I thank you for their contribution, support, and partnership, and indeed EBRD is a valuable partner to Azerbaijan. I also would like to acknowledge Honorable Minister, Madam Governor. It's a great pleasure and personal privilege to see you once again, and I think your participation here also underlines the strengths of connectivity, partnership, good neighborhood that we truly enjoy. Last but not the least, I thank you for putting together such an impressive panel, because I think it is also very representative of the scope, depth, and coverage of what we do. So in the remaining couple of minutes, I'll try to address your question. I will put it into two parts. One is what we do in terms of policies, and second, probably more on practical side. Well, I guess on policies, it all starts with political commitment. You already mentioned COP29. We also working very actively in the region. Of course, the projects that are initiated, including the green connectivity, I'm sure my colleague, Deputy Minister Soltanov, will talk about it, aiming to bring renewable energy produced in Azerbaijan, in Georgia, to European markets. Wouldn't be possible without strong political support and cooperation. It goes beyond Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, but we're also working with the region to the east of Azerbaijan, with the Central Asia. Again, the example here of determination to link our energy systems, including and mainly focused on renewable with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, are happening as we speak, and this has been formalized at the highest political level by presidents of these countries signing during COP. Second element, of course, relates to domestic legislation, enabling legislation that will also be split into two. One are the aims. We are working towards these numbers. Second are specific policy tools to enable better and faster adaptation because it's not just, to me at least, energy transition is not just about how much energy you can produce, but it's also about your consumers. Last point that I will make is that I think we are also very openly willing and sharing the equity risks. All renewable projects in Azerbaijan are done by private sector, mainly by foreign investors, also by local, but government acting via 100% state-owned SOCAR is taking up and open to take up any minority interest in the project as investor partner requires. So by putting our manat, dollar, euro next to the investors' ones, I think this is a very straightforward, let's say, signal of the commitment to the energy transition that we do. Just to be very clear, and this is not just ideological. In case of Azerbaijan, it is mainly economical, because while majority of our revenues is still generated by other traditional sources of energy, however, it's not just about ideological shift. We do believe that in order to be attractive for investors, the projects must have economic rationale. So that's where I stop.
Thank you, Minister Jabbarov, for your forward-looking perspective. And I think it would be natural that my next question would be to the Deputy Minister of Energy to build on this topic. Mr. Soltanov, what additional regulatory or policy changes are also in the pipeline to further strengthen Azerbaijan's renewable energy sector?
Thank you, Natalie. So in the last couple of years, we have adopted 4 laws on energy, on power sector, on renewables and energy efficiency. And we have 3 in the pipeline, 1 on heating, 1 on gas supply, and 1 on regulator. I want to emphasize the one on heating, because there we really put emphasis on district heating, which is not very much widespread in Azerbaijan, which is about also efficiency, and also application of new technologies like heat pumps. All right, so this is really the main thrust of the new legislation on heating. We also, of course, with your support, we are doing law on regulator that will be very important in terms of really expanding and pushing forward the great work that the regulatory agency in Azerbaijan has been doing, especially in making sure that we have cost-based tariff systems in the country. Regarding those laws that we already adopted, I think the most consequential has been one on the renewable energy. And you also indicated, Mr. Minister, pointed significant issues. And I want to kind of go back to your introductory remarks and tell everybody that, in fact, we will be having more than 30% and before 2030, actually. So probably by 2028, we expect to have something like 32% in terms of installed capacity in Azerbaijan. Also, we, again, with your support, with EBRD's support, we are branching out into, Mr. Minister was talking about FTIs. We also place a lot of emphasis on so-called prosumers, right? Active consumers. That is, individuals in Azerbaijan can already, and they are already doing that, by the way, place up to 150 kilowatts solar panels or maybe other forms of renewable energy and buy and sell electricity this way. So this is something we are working on to push forward. But I should tell you that, and also the law on power sector is very important because it really is our guiding principle in terms of power sector liberalization, to which we attach a lot of importance. But the thing you are going to be hearing a lot, which is qualitatively new for Azerbaijan, would be the consequences or the implications of the law on energy efficiency. We are working currently on about 12 bylaws there related to certification in buildings, appliances, energy auditing, and we also have this energy efficiency fund, which has a sustainable financial base, by the way. We are taxing fossil fuels, actually, to sustain that. And this is an entirely new area for Azerbaijan, institutionally speaking. Of course, there have been a lot of policies in that regard, but for the first time, we are getting ready really to institutionalize our policies vis-a-vis energy efficiency issues, which we believe there's a lot of low-hanging fruits out there. Because again, in terms of renewable energy, we are doing great, and probably we'll come back to that. But energy efficiency-wise, this new source of energy, right? We say that efficiency could turn out to be a new source of energy. And in fact, in Azerbaijan, given this very fine balance between traditional and renewable energy, energy efficiency really pays. But it's a challenge because we have really this, specifically, the stock of buildings coming from the Soviet Union, where the energy efficiency was the least of concerns. But at the same time, that means that we could make some big kills out there because that's an almost virgin area. And we are very excited that, again, in coming years, if not months, you will be hearing from the Minister of Energy more about qualitatively new area-wise energy efficiency than anything else. Thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Soltanov, and we look forward to all these developments in the country. So let us now shift to the private sector perspective. Azerbaijan has signed major agreements with global renewable energy developers to expand solar and wind capacity. Among these, Mazdar's 10-gigawatt framework agreement is one of the most ambitious and largest in the region. So, Mr. Khan, what are the key factors that make Azerbaijan an attractive market for renewable energy investors like Masdar?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. So maybe just to sort of provide some context, I feel like UAE and Azerbaijan have a very similar background in terms of economies, which are primarily based on oil and gas, and now economies and countries that are realizing that the diversification of the energy mix is not just an ethical responsibility, but also is a commercially sound strategy. And it's sustainable in the long term. So for us as an investor, I think a few things, maybe three things that I'd like to sort of highlight that have really attracted us as an investor to Azerbaijan. The number one thing is the commitment. The commitment of leadership, commitment, as the ministers have already highlighted, to ensuring that renewables, specifically from an energy mix perspective, the 2030 target that you mentioned, which I just found out is going to be beaten with at even earlier pace, hopefully, inshallah, that's testament, right? That's testament that work is being done, laws are being put in place in order for this to be enacted. So I think the number one thing for us as a private sector investor is the commitment aspect, and that definitely exists, and that makes the market very attractive. The other thing is the availability of natural resource. So natural resource as a natural renewable resource. So both from a solar perspective and a wind perspective. And we know in Azerbaijan, both are there's an abundance of both. On the wind side in particular, not just onshore, but offshore as well. So the potential is very, very significant, and we know it's untapped energy, which we need to effectively access and come up with smart ways of how to access that. And I think the third one probably worth mentioning is the regulatory environment and framework. As Mr. Soltanov already mentioned, a lot of steps have been taken in order to make that regulatory framework and environment more stable and more appealing and attractive to investors. Long-term power purchase agreements, which is typically how investors, especially in the generation side of things, developers, how we typically see it. And that makes the projects bankable and allow us to bring debt investors like yourselves, obviously, as well, and really help fast-track that. So I think having a stable regulatory environment is absolutely critical. And again, we've seen that work very well in Azerbaijan. And as a result of these sort of factors amongst various others, as you mentioned, Natalie, as well, we've not just invested so far. We have a 230 megawatt operating PV plant in Gardag, but we have many more to come. We've signed a development agreement with up to 10 gigawatts in the short to medium term upcoming. So we see a lot of potential, and we see a lot of things that are working well in the region.
Thank you. Thank you for the private sector perspective. I think it's very important when the interests of the private and the public coincide. Thank you. Mr. Solzhenitsyn, McKinsey has been at the forefront of advising governments on national and sectoral decarbonization strategies. So in this context, what additional market mechanisms or financial instruments could further accelerate private sector investment in Azerbaijan's green energy sector?
Yeah, thank you. And no, it's a topic, as you say, it's globally relevant and many countries come at it. And I think, as was mentioned, the context is very important. So one thing is that, as people, of course, know, in many parts of the region, there's a little bit of a competition, I think, between countries about who can become a leader in one or another aspect, so that you can lead not just for your own population, but also for the immediate neighborhood, and whether you can export or not. So I think in this energy discussion, I would break into two parts. So one is really, what is the energy structure of supply and demand inside a country like Azerbaijan? And certainly it's great to hear of the movement in building up the generation capacity. I'm based in China these days. I mean, there's a lot of generation capacity, not all of it is used. So I think balancing the elements of the value chain very important. And I think when we think about that, you got to just make sure that the generation capacity is matched by the grid capacity, but also upgrades in terms of managing, you know, the intermittency of the renewables. A balanced approach to energy storage, and I know that one of the priorities, and this is a great area for private sector to come in actually with the energy storage investments. And, you know, I think there is a big interest right now also, certainly, again, if I look at it a little bit from what you hear in China, for a lot of the equipment manufacturers to see if they can actually not just export to the world, but actually go and localize. And I think one of the interesting topics to look at energy, it's not just energy for energy's sake, it's also as a way to attract investment in industrialization. And the diversification away from, let's say, the hydrocarbon legacy, which is a great gift, it's also to say, like, okay, what hubs are we going to build, and what conditions, both of transport, which we talk later, but also of energy, I can provide to that. And that then, of course, brings us again to this interesting question of, what do I export? Do I export the green energy? Beautiful idea, I think. I mean, look at the amount of investments going into solar in the Middle East. A lot of that is basically saying we're going to use this cheap, green, clean energy to manufacture stuff and sell it to Europe and elsewhere. That could be the model here. But also you could say, will I just ship energy, or will I try to make some manufacturing? And then, that will be the green products. And that's an interesting integrated set of trade-offs. And so when you say, what about private capital, I would even look broader than just in the elements specifically of generation, transmission, and storage, but almost like, what is the vision of the, call it, industrialization? And if you look at the world today, we all see these winds of, thinking of having inside your country certain amount of critical elements of value chains, not just relying on imports, for various reasons, geopolitical, economic, protectionist, and so on. And I think that is a very interesting area where, in the Central Asian markets, if every single country for itself wants to have its own industry and everything, it's a bit subscale. If you just say we import everything from, I don't know, Middle East or Asia, it's a bit risky. So can there be this cooperation around this connectivity in the region where you're sharing energy, you're sharing industrialization, you de-risk maybe through cross-investments, and I think that's just a fascinating direction. And that's why it's a great idea to talk about energy and transport together, because that energy, transport, and labor in the end are the three ingredients that are going to allow for the industrial vision. So I think Azerbaijan, by the way, the COP29, probably many were here. I think it did a great job, not only to advance the discussion, but to actually let people discover that, wow, what a great place Azerbaijan is to come and visit and maybe even invest in. So.
Thank you, Mr. Solzhenitsyn. It's very important to see also the global advisory lens in terms of what is happening in the country and in the region. And as you correctly mentioned, connectivity is an important part. So I think it's time we move to the topic of connectivity, which is a growing pillar of Azerbaijan's development agenda. Azerbaijan is actively collaborating with Georgia, Romania, and Hungary to establish a green energy corridor that will transport renewable electricity to Europe. And in parallel, discussions are underway with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, as you mentioned, Mr. Jabbarov, to enable the cross-regional green energy exports from Central Asia to Europe. So, question to you, Minister. What opportunities do these green energy corridor initiatives present for regional economic cooperation? And how does Azerbaijan plan to tap into them? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, just to add on geography, I think in addition to these countries, we also have to say Turkey and Bulgaria. They are already sort of in the picture. And allow me to address your question from the following angle. Energy and connectivity, I wouldn't frankly separate between these two. And I will say that there are two elements that are necessary. One is necessity. Because geographically, if you look at the map, we, from day one of the restoring of our independence, we realize that, okay, without access to the open seas, your economic development and your well-being is very much dependent on the connectivity, right? From these flows, of course, the quality of the relationship. I mean, do you really want to rely and can you really be connected to those whom, for whatever reason, you have reasons, strong and legitimate reasons to distrust? And I think the answer is obvious. So are you going to put investments? Really? Are you going to send national wealth or invite investors to join in that? So I think these two important elements, which I will say under necessity and quality of the relationship, also define the scope and the way how we build the relationship which we value, because relationship is a two-way street. You cannot really have a relationship which is good in one direction and not good in another. It's a third time we're trying now to use connectivity for energy purposes. We did it first together working for oil more than 20 years ago now. We did it successfully with gas. I know now I'm not supposed sort of to applaud EBRD for this, but both of these happened with support and
different time.
Right. And of course now we're doing it for renewable energy, but broader for the energy. By the way, a few of these countries, as we speak, are already in that sense market destinations for energy, electricity, this time meaning being exported out of Azerbaijan. Next element is that, and I know that I'm in my last minute, that we don't also think that it's correct to limit it by electrons. There's a good story around molecules, especially the one which we're joining hands with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to develop is also very much about molecules on that. And I think we are yet to see the ultimate benefit for all the countries involved. We will continue to have inclusive partnership-based investments, risk-shared approaches. And I think I also take this opportunity to express appreciation to, on one hand, partner governments, nations who walk this road with us, but on the other hand, of course, to investors backed by IFIs, by their own shareholders, because it's a joint journey that I think we will go together.
Thank you very much. And I think you mentioned a few of our previous engagements. And as the time moves, of course, as an EBRD, we'll be happy to participate in the 21st century investment of connectivity. So that will take us to the next point, to Mr. Soltanov. So since 2022, Azerbaijan has initiated over 1,200 megawatts of renewable energy projects with leading international suppliers. Considering these investments as well as the green connectivity initiatives, what are the main infrastructure and grid integration challenges, and how Azerbaijan aims to address them?
Well, I mean, if you look at, I mean, if the question is what determines the pace of renewable energy integration and renewable energy investments in Azerbaijan, I would say there are two things. One is really the challenges of integration, which is directly related to your question. And before moving to the second one, which is price, let me kind of a little bit dwell on the first one, because given the intermittency of renewable energy, there are two ways you kind of absorb that shock that could be coming from integrating more and more of it. One is the size, right? The bigger you are, more resilient you are. Azerbaijan is not that big, which is geography, which is the size of the grid system we have. I mean, we have the installed capacity is 8 gigawatts in the country, and our average annual consumption is around 3 gigawatts, really. The second is connectivity, right? You might not have your domestic internal capacity to absorb. Well, you can help get the help from your neighbors and balance your system that way. European countries actually benefit from both. Most of them are huge. And second, they are really well connected to neighborhood. And what we saw in Spain somehow was related to the fact that they were not, I mean, it's a big system, definitely not comparable to Azerbaijan, but their connectivity was a problem, right? The only connection they had was France, and which did not work very well when they were having that problem a couple of weeks ago. So therefore, as Mr. Minister was indicating, for us, connectivity is not just about economic potential, it's also about grid resilience, right? So it's becoming a necessity. And that necessity, again, comes back from the challenges we are facing, challenges of geography, challenges of size, and at the same time, we have this tyranny of distance, right? Azerbaijan is quite far away from the major markets in the world, major technology centers of the world. And all these challenges, I think Mr. Minister beautifully put it, we turn them into opportunities in the case of traditional energy resources. And I think we are doing almost the same thing vis-a-vis renewable energy. The second thing, as I said, is really price. Okay, resilience, fine, you can increase it, modernize your system, and get connectivities to your neighboring countries, but at what cost, right? Because when we talk about levelized cost of electricity coming from PV, solar, and wind energy, we don't include the cost of integration and the cost of modernization and grid resilience, right? If you add them, I agree that in many, many cases, levelized cost is very competitive vis-a-vis gas-fired power plants. But gas-fired power plants have this elasticity in terms of the choice of the place. Renewable energy usually dictates its own geography, and that could happen far away from your grid system, right? So, for instance, as has been indicated, those 2+ gigawatts of renewable we plan to integrate will bring to the country about $2 billion in terms of foreign direct investment and domestic investment. But for every dollar of this generation investment, we have to spend about 33 cents for grid connectivity and grid resilience, right? And this is very costly. And then the third issue becomes, very briefly, who is going to pay for that? Especially in a country like Azerbaijan, who is coming from the Soviet mentality, and where there is, in a sense, a social contract between state and population about utilities, because the expectation of the population is that utilities should be actually free, right? So passing them, the cost over to the population, is a very difficult question. You have to really explain that well. So then, I think, therefore, we are back to EBRD, to those multinational banks who could be very, very helpful in this regard in terms of really solving these problems, and also, in a sense, underwriting the cost of all this endeavor.
Thank you. Very interesting. And I think it's important that you shared with us these insights, which is very timely. And I think that would lead me also to my next question to our private sector company. So how are companies like Masdar supporting in overcoming infrastructure and grid integration challenges? So, for example, in case of Azerbaijan.
That's a good question. I think one aspect which I'd really like to pick up on that Mr. Soltanov mentioned is the challenge of intermittency when it comes to renewables, because that is by far the biggest challenge that we have, from which the challenges on grid integration, overall infrastructure investment, et cetera, all stem from. I think from an intermittency perspective, us as a developer, as a generator of renewable energy, we are obviously working on various aspects, things like the introduction of AI, predicting weather patterns more accurately in order to make sure that we know what we're going to dispatch when, and so on and so forth. But those have small implications. One of the key things which we're seeing more and more in the renewable energy sector is large-scale storage solutions. And these help resolve that intermittency. Yes, sun's shining during the day, but not at night. Wind's blowing at a certain time, not other times of the day. But when you have the introduction of storage solutions, specifically in the more recent past with the technological advances in BESS, the battery energy storage systems, at a grand scale, this can really help and have a knock-on impact on resolving the infrastructure investment required from a transmission and distribution standpoint. I'd like to give an example of a project that we at Masdar are very proud of. We recently announced it a couple of months ago. We call it the round-the-clock project, and this is something which is something we've pioneered effectively. In our backyard, we are installing 5.2 gigawatts of solar, coupled with 19 gigawatt hours of battery, which for the first time ever is giving 1 gigawatt baseload energy, 24/7, 365 days a year, purely from renewable energy. Now, again, we're doing that at this scale. I mean, just from a scale perspective, this is both solar and battery-wise 3 times the size, almost 3 times the size of the next largest one. So we're doing this at a grand scale in our backyard, and we're really looking to export this globally. And as I said, batteries, I mean, if you look at battery costs and technological advances have come down quite significantly. Today, based on today's technology, it is commercially viable. But then similar to what we've seen on the PV side of things, where there was a significant decline, we only expect that decline in terms of cost to continue on the battery front, which would make it more and more appealing. And then effectively, us as developers and generators have a knock-on resolution from a transmission infrastructure perspective.
Thank you. This is not only interesting, it's fascinating. I guess 21st century brings completely new initiatives and opportunities. So in the context of connectivity priorities, I would like to move to the transport connectivity questions. Recent geopolitical developments have underscored the importance of Trans-Caspian corridor, the middle corridor. The transit volume over the corridor has grown substantially since 2022, and there is a potential to grow further. So, Mr. Jabbarov, what measures is Azerbaijan implementing to further increase trade across its territory?
2 minutes or 3?
You can have as much.
Okay. Energy, non-energy. For record, for energy, Azerbaijan today acts not just as a producer, but also as a transit hub. I think this is a little bit sort of under-noticed. Virtually all of the Turkmen origin crude oil products, petrochemicals are being exported via Azerbaijani transportation system, with every year more and more of Kazakh crude and origin. Why I start with this is because this is a reflection of the view and point which we have been consistently taking, that it is about partnership, it's about regional cooperation, it's about creating hubs, and everyone really benefits. And we spoke extensively, again, on energy side, that we're really working together with our friends and neighbors to continue to connect further to the east, and in that sense, this middle corridor, which we traditionally refer to as non-energy goods and transportation, in fact, has significant energy element, which will continue to grow in my conviction. So second is therefore non-energy. Here, again, in my opinion, I would say that it's a middle corridor with positive deviations. And what I mean is that it's not geographically strict all the time, all the cargo flows east-west or north-south as Azerbaijan's geographical location is concerned, but we're very often witnessing this going east-south or in any other direction. Now, what it also means, therefore, that I guess we need to keep in mind the growing with every year. Let me approach it from a different angle. If you take a look at the economic regions and our trade balance and turnover, the fastest growth we have experienced in the last 3 years is with the region of Central Asia. This will continue. All the projections show that the increased connectivity is good not only for transit, but it's also good for the regional economic activity, and in that sense we can envisage Southern Caucasus and Central Asian own trade and investment flow increase. Finally, transit as such. So for transit as such, what we do, just few things. We put a lot of emphasis on the smoothness of the transit that requires internal coordination and external coordination of the relevant agencies involved, state customs, border sanitary, etc. Physical infrastructure. I think we can say that there are no visible bottlenecks, or at least we try to envisage the bottleneck and work together when we see it, although there are some issues like Caspian Sea draft, reducing the capacity of the volume which any given bulk carrier or container carrier can take, but I think we're aware of it and we're working together regionally. And maybe last point that I will add is that we're trying to also make it attractive by introducing value added approach. Allied-free economic zone is a good example of that, where we're trying to get a synergy from the flow of transit and turn it into the industrialization by providing industrial hub, which could also serve a broader region. In terms of how, I think two quick answers. One is digitalization. We invest and will continue to invest a lot. And second is joint activity. Because even on not only on a government coordination, but also on a corporate solution level, there is a more and more, along with mutual investments, but there is a lot of joint companies where countries and their legal entities sitting on the road will participate jointly, because having skin in the game is irreplaceable.
Thank you, and I can totally resonate with what you're saying, based in Azerbaijan and doing the work for EBRD. So, Mr. Solzhenitsyn, based on the McKinsey experience of advising governments on connectivity policies, what measures you think could improve the capacity and attractiveness of Middle Corridor, to continue our topic?
Yeah, well, I think Mr. Minister spoke of many of the elements that I think are important here that I would also have mentioned. But if I just take a step back again, the transportation infrastructure in the region obviously has the Soviet legacy, which was very much focused on internal flows within the USSR and not so much going outward somewhere. So as we hit, the 90s and later, we found that the whole region was basically, in some ways, underconnected, or connected only internally, where everything shifted. So everywhere. The middle corridor, north, south, east, west, the various projects in Central Asia, various projects in Turkey. I think there's a lot of these new like arteries, veins coming up, and I think actually together they create a very powerful moment, because I think sometimes people speak of competition of these corridors. Now, of course, before 2022, I mean, nobody shipped anything from China to Europe, offloading and unloading in Caspian Sea. I mean, this was economically longer and more expensive. And the fact is that many shippers, you talk to them and say, listen, well, geopolitics changes. At some point, that northern route, you know, it will play its role. But the interesting thing is that, of course, we see that for the last 5 years, there's been so many lessons in the world of people saying, you got to diversify. There's got to be alternatives. So I think the middle corridor is in a beautiful place to be seamless, more and more seamlessly created as an alternative that many people value because of the uncertainty of sometimes a big corridor open or sometimes closed. I think the north-south is fascinating. The north-south, for now, of course, nobody will touch it because, you know, to the north there's problems, to the south there's problems. But if you just look at the map and a little bit abstract, of course, Azerbaijan sitting in that location, it's also a very important artery. And I fully agree that if there's a flow of raw materials going through, with good, cheap green energy, you know, you need, you know, you do a couple of conversions. So what a great step for economic growth. But the opportunities and the benefits of the corridor, I mean, they've been talked about a lot. I fully agree. The transit I wouldn't bet on, but the Western China, Central Asia, more local, that's, you know, that is a great opportunity and that is a stable thing. Or governance, Caspian Sea investments. I would also say one thing. It would be great if the investors in that corridor were not only transportation companies, but if it was also, let's say, industrials thinking of creating something also as like an integrated supply chain. Because again, one of the risks is, you know, what happens if supply chains get cut off by different threats and volatilities. You know, if you get an investor into something on the Caspian, you know, and they also invest in the transport part, you know, you're pretty safe. So I think this combination of themes, but again, I would really view this as, in the world today that has gotten so much more uncertain, there's a great niche for you know, these alternatives, but I would really think of it in a broader industrialization sense and maybe in a cross-investment sense. People sometimes say, well, what if this will go north, or what if it will go eventually somehow through Turkmenistan, and then you don't need to go twice through the sea? But I think if people think of let's cross-invest, this actually just creates much better conditions for goods.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, mindful of the time, I would like to ask one last question and still manage to squeeze at least one question from the audience or from Slido. So if you had, and that question will be for all of you, if you had to name one game-changing initiative Azerbaijan should implement to secure its role as a regional leader in green energy and connectivity, what would it be? Mr. Jabbarov?
Yes, I would think of I would think of completing the connection system that will enable accessible export to the investors, local and foreign, in the region.
Thank you. Mr. Soltanov, any insights from you? It's on.
I think Azerbaijan has been really good in terms of putting together coalitions, in pulling off projects that are challenged by geography, by size, by being landlocked before. And this gave us a certain infrastructure, you like it or not, but the infrastructure we have from the traditional resources of energy are coming handy in terms of the renewable energy, right? The pipelines could be repurposed for hydrogen transportation. Oil and gas infrastructure could be used for offshore wind projects. But to me also here, what is important, if to borrow Marxist phraseology, superstructure of coalition building, right? So this human labor,
you went to Marx.
human ability, our ability to put together. I mean, again, Georgia, Mr. Minister indicated, without Georgia, we wouldn't able to pull off the projects that we have done so far, right? We are landlocked, but together with Georgia, we are not landlocked anymore.
Yeah.
And I think we were able to build regional coalitions with global implications, and with that, we have been at the forefront of the energy revolutions before. I think with the same thing, we are going to be at the forefront of green energy revolution as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Private sector perspective, maybe?
So if I'm being a bit selfish, thinking about green energy from a developer standpoint, we briefly talked about this earlier as well. There are a lot of things, as I mentioned earlier, that are working very, very well. I think one thing which would be which is a challenge, which we've seen a challenge globally, is with the change in the technology mix, and again, I'll come back to the storage solutions. So with the change in the technology mix and the generation of renewable energy and the supply of renewable energy no longer being just through PV panels and just through wind turbines, but storage being coupled as a solution, or storage maybe even being looked at separately as a provider in order to reduce the grid integration challenges. I think the key thing there would be ensuring that there is a regulatory environment that is dynamic enough to adapt to those technological changes. So I think that would be a key game changer, because we've seen a lot of and this is from east to west globally, because we've operations across the world. We've seen a lot of struggles on that front, and you really need to be dynamic and agile in order to address them on a timely basis.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting. I couldn't agree more. Mr. Solzhenitsyn, any points from you?
Yeah. Well, on the Marxism, since we're in London, I guess this is the right city to. You know, look, I mean, there's a lot of, like, of course, good and things one used to do. But if you say one idea, again, and maybe I'm influenced by being based in Shanghai or so on, but if you look at the big picture in economically globally right now, I think there's a very good conditions for Europe, China, Central Asia flows to be a little bit depoliticized for various reasons, or at least somehow. There's a big China-Middle East flow. There's obviously China-Central Asia. There's obviously a lot of Europe, Caspian, and increasingly Europe, Central Asia. Why not have, I mean, Azerbaijan showed that they can do great conferences on energy and in general. You know, get this big Silk Route conversation going in energy. Again, you have a situation where you have Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Central Asia, and a lot of this, as you said, mind-boggling technology advances, mostly coming out of China these days because of scale. And they are so hungry to go and put it elsewhere because the China market is oversaturated. And as you know, we don't need to ask what equipment you installed in that 19 gigawatt storage. So, you know, a conference like that, an energy corridor, 2 years from COP, because, you know, a lot of people, when the topic comes up of sustainability, they seem this stereotype of like, well, is it still matter? Is it still going on? Look at America, IRAs being canceled, stuff. But it's, you know, there's a lot of fundamental economics in it. But I think they need this like open conversation, and it's hard, but I think a place like Azerbaijan can help to depoliticize it, because it's a bit charged. Anyway, such a conversation, hosting one like that, I think that could be a good thing to do.
Would you like to respond to suggestion on this one? I think there are quite a few bits has been done.
We have this regular energy conference in Baku, which of course many have visited, and which our friend and partner ministry and SOCAR are always jointly co-organizing. So I think it's a really a good idea, given that on Southern Gas Corridor we have already added the element on the green energy. And I have to say this for record, but you see, he's in a much better position to answer, because this is his job to give advices and on-the-spot decisions. And we are the government bureaucrats who have to follow sort of the rules, but that's just a...
Thank you, thank you. I've scrolled through the questions from our audience, and there are quite a few of them. So I would like to pick the one that everyone could participate in. What steps can countries in the region take together to attract green investment and create a stronger unified value proposition for international partners. I think we've touched on some of that, but maybe in a global context. Open floor to all of you.
Well, maybe an example of UAE.
Okay.
I can make a very specific example that right now we have finalized the CEPA, Cooperation Economic Partnership Agreement. It's not directly focused on energy, but I think that we have inherited, for instance, the free trade agreements with those countries who come from former Soviet Union. But in fact, the region is much broader and much more interconnected. So I think unification of the level playing field from financial services to flow of technologies and people and goods is certainly, to me, is another important element of ecosystem of connectivity in the big world. And of course, energy is important.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay, that gives me room for another one. How can regional connectivity initiatives like the green energy corridors or middle corridor can boost energy transition across the wider region, in your opinion? Open for all.
Sure. So I can maybe comment on that based on how we've seen it work in other parts of the world. I think the comment was mentioned earlier by Mr. Soltanov in terms of when it comes to green energy, sometimes green energy, or in fact a good chunk of the times green energy, the production is at a certain place, but the transmission or use rather is at a different place, and therefore the transformation infrastructure that is required may be quite significant. In a lot of places that we've seen is you've got countries which, when they cooperate together, for example, you've got population hubs at certain borders, which are away from the central cities of that specific country, but then are very close to production hubs in another country. And therefore, rather than building transmission lines, long transmission lines, and investing in infrastructure over such a significant distance in order to provide energy for a small population, these basically interconnection agreements that you sign with sort of your neighbors can really help resolve that. And it works both ways, right? It works vice versa. We're looking very actively at that in the Middle East region with our neighbors in the UAE. We've seen that sort of work in other parts of the world, and we see that being more and more of, let's say, an area of discussion in different parts in order to effectively solve for primarily the transmission, significant infrastructure investment required from a transmission perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. And one more question, because we didn't really have an opportunity to touch on the green hydrogen, which you mentioned during your speech, but I think this is a very good question. So maybe to Mr. Soltanov and Mr. Khan, how does the government see green hydrogen fitting into Azerbaijan's long-term energy transition? And what role can private sector play in this field?
I mean, green transition and green revolution is not possible just with electrons, as Mr. Minister was implying. So molecules are as important. And to be honest with you, Azerbaijan, you cannot expect us to be at the forefront of hydrogen issue. But and again, one open secret to you, we have this sizable scale in terms of offshore wind energy. And the way we started thinking seriously about hydrogen, and specifically green hydrogen, was as a storage system, right? Because again, storage systems are very, very expensive, but hydrogen has very nice, so when you have too much energy that you cannot, there could be curtailment for. Can you channel that energy for production of hydrogen, which can then turn into electricity when you have short supply, or could be exported as a molecule? So this was the idea, actually, right? But again, and there are studies, again, with your support, we have done some studies. Blue hydrogen, Azerbaijan has competitive advantage in terms of blue hydrogen as well. We have natural gas, we have depleted oil and gas fields for carbon capture and storage, but at the same time, we pushed our consultants towards green energy as much as we could. But again, we have to go with the flow in the world, right? Whatever happening is the world, and I think everybody here knows what is going on. So maybe 5 years ago, we have much more upbeat expectations regarding green hydrogen. Today, we don't have the same thing. But again, in every consultancy that we are hiring, and I appreciate free advice definitely, but whenever we hire them, we have to include issues related to green hydrogen. And given the scale that we have in the Caspian, we believe that that way, and given the infrastructure I was mentioning before, we could create some kind of ecosystem, symbiotic relationship between them, and again, pull this off. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
Just on the hydrogen, yeah. You know, we speaking of consultancy, every time we've made a forecast on electric vehicles, we always lowballed it. It ended up being quicker than the forecast. Probably not only us, but we even have this funny slide which shows, you know, each time the reality was higher. Exactly the opposite with hydrogen. Hydrogen has kind of made sense for a while, but it has been slower, and there's a lot of reasons. A lot of it is around just there's a lot of elements in the system that need to match. It's not just electrolyzer production. It's the whole plants. It's transportation. It's safety. It's a lot of issues. Our analysis shows in some areas it's already in the money. In Europe, oil refining, for example, but with very strong fiscal regulatory, let's say, incentives or penalties. Without that, for now, it doesn't make sense. So I think probably there's a lot of other things to focus on in the meantime.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
Completely unrelated to hydrogen, but for record, because I think that now I also read that it's a sort of investment outlook session, and it's very relevant to what we have discussed. We have worked for last about year on ambition of ensuring the mechanism and availability for green energy powered industrial park.
Okay.
So 1 week ago, actually physically 1 week ago, we have got sign off of President Ilham Aliyev for this. And I think that given that what we're discussing, and you know, it was also mentioned on CBAM, on green energy. So I think that today as a value proposition, this is something what we will be able to offer in the coming physical calendar year. Opportunities for industrialization, localization of industry based on an offtake of produced green and renewable energy. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do it if many of the subjects which my colleagues have discussed here,
Sure.
Battery, permanent storage of renewable energy generation, transmission, grid. But I think this is something what people interested in doing business in or with Azerbaijan should
Thank you. Indeed, very interesting, and hopefully it will pick up, and good luck with that. So thank you all for your insightful contributions. Thank you for your participation. I think the session showed that ultimately Azerbaijan is on an amazing and great pathway to the green growth and connectivity. We appreciate your participation. Let's thank our guests and thank you all to be part of our discussion today.
Thank you very much.